TAC meeting. First, we have the approval of the TAC agenda for March 27th today. Make a motion we approve today's agenda.
So moved.
All right. Next, we have the approval of the TAC meeting minutes from February 27th. I'll make a motion we approve the February 27th meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passed. Next, we have the director's report. Chad.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Technical Advisory Committee. Good morning, everyone. We have a pretty good agenda. Many speakers lined up. We're excited. There are some economic reports from Wichita State University today. And then we also have safety presentations from Sedgwick County as well as KDOT from Vanessa, maybe online. Hope Vanessa is okay. Vanessa Spartan is presenting on item in 5 and hope it's okay. By the time it goes to that far, it may take time. Hopefully that's okay. We have a couple of items to report to you on, the carbon reduction program that call for projects were sent out for jurisdictions. And Nick had sent out how the carbon reduction program projects can be submitted. And then we have until May 1st. So we are, that's going on. And then one other item in this report is the federal certification review. From Federal Highway Administration, we have Cecily Cochran and Matt McDonald from Federal Highway Administration in Topeka. They'll be coming down here to Wichita MPO during May 10th to 12th, 3 days, half of 10th and the entire day of 11 and the half day of 12th Friday. This happens every 4 years. Last time it occurred was in 2019. This cycle is again in 2023. So you're welcome to attend some of those sessions and talk to the federal administration in terms of providing input from the TAC members' perspective. So I just want to take this opportunity to invite you. As the time gets closer, I will send out an agenda to you what items are, for example, TIP is one of the items, Transportation Improvement Program, and then Long Range Transportation Plan, and various items are scheduled during this 3-day. Like one example is the financial and auditing, how that goes on. So as time gets closer to that date, I will share with you the agenda for as it develops. So just want to give an update on, that's an opportunity for additional input, how WAMPO staff can improve and serve you better. So that type of thing. That was the intent to share this with you as well. So I guess without further ado, I will give the control back to our chair and for the meeting to take place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chad. All right, next we have public comments.
We did have Cecily online to speak about the certification review.
Sorry, Cecily, we would like to welcome Cecily Cochran to make the presentation. Short presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Cecily.
Good. My name is Cecily Cochran. I am the community planner from the Federal Highway Kansas Division. I'm also online with Ava Steinman of FTA. She will definitely be kind of
actually, and excuse me, Cecily, but I would like to take this opportunity to remind Wichita area planning here that it is a joint review between Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration. One DOT certifies the planning process in the Wichita area, and so please remember that we're part of it as well. Thank you.
My apologies. Yes, Ava is also coming on the day.
Yes, she will be definitely helping throughout the process. So just getting started, just to remind everybody why we're doing this, as Chad mentioned, this is a certification that we have to conduct every 4 years just to verify that the MPO is in compliance with all the federal regulations for transportation planning. You all probably see it in your documents, especially for your TIP, your self-certification statements. So we're just going to reemphasize that just to make sure everything is in line and that you all are conducting your process not only in line with the regulations, but as fair and equitable as possible. Just a little background from how we're going to start off the process, which we have already been in contact with WAMPO staff about, just going over the previous reports, seeing what was already done, any particular commendations that the MPO was doing well as far as, you know, their processes, and then also evaluating any recommendations from the 2019 review that we may want to follow up on when we contact the staff with questionnaire, just to kind of give them some items that we're going to be looking at. Also, as a part of the process, which I'm glad Chad mentioned, to have you all know when we're coming so that you can be part of that public participation process. We will be getting with staff, not only to probably have a virtual survey available for those who can't come in and engage with us in person, but we do plan to have a public meeting during that particular site visit in May, probably one of the days from the 10th through the 12th, where we'll schedule a couple hours just to allow anyone who wants to come in and speak with us, whether that be like committee members or members of the public, just to see who we are, see what the transportation process is about, and verify whether or not you guys have any questions or concerns. With the actual site visit, myself and Ava are definitely coming. We'll probably have other members of Federal Highway and FTA staff coming as well to meet with Wichita Transit, MPO staff, and any other stakeholders for any follow-up questions that we don't address during the internal process for review. And then once we have that site visit conducted, we will kind of go over all of our findings, draft up a report that we can possibly review with WAMPO staff before we get it finalized for any potential recognition of things that you guys are doing great, commendations in your processes, and also any potential recommendations and or corrective actions if need be. And then once that is finalized, we will work with MPO staff and your committee members to apply any recommendations as needed or resolve any corrective actions if any are found. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of us coming. I anticipate a really good process. So far, WAMPO has been very forthcoming with the things that we've asked for. So we're going to do everything we can to get you guys recertified. But if you guys have any questions or you want to follow up with us, I think there's a slide with Ava and myself's contact information. You guys can go to the next slide. Please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to answer any questions you may have. And Ava, if you have anything, feel free to chime in.
Oh, no, you covered it great there, Cecily. Yeah, and you know, the last time we were in WAMPO for the certification review was 2019. The review went really well, so I'm looking forward to it this time again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cecily, and thank you. Last time, 2019, I think Eva was here, and then we're excited to see again FTA and FHWA, both of them. I think Cecily Cochran and Matt McDonald and Ava Steinman, all three are coming for those 3 days. And then the full schedule, there's so much to discuss, so much initiatives and projects are happening at WAMPO, so much we have staff like Ashley, myself, Nick, and Alicia, and all of us have so much to share with the FHWA and FTA on projects and initiatives that's going on. And then we'll keep you updated as time progresses this certification. Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you both. Looking forward to May.
So are we. Thank you.
All right, next we have public comments. Seeing none, next we have some action items. The first one is the fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2026 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment 3, Reasonable Progress Policy. We have Ashley and Nick.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ashley Byers. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager here at WAMPO. And the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is the short-range program projects that are 4 years worth of projects that are being implemented that tie back to the long-range plan, or the MTP, which is currently called Reimagine Move 2040. And we're starting on the MTP 2050 process right now, just a little plug. So the Reasonable Progress Policy is an element of the TIP that we realized we needed to make some adjustments to. And so we included in this TIP amendment, which had a 15-day public comment period, which we received no public comments. And then we're here today for your recommendation to TPB, and hopefully on April 11th, TPB will approve this. You can find the full TIP amendment at our website. So the Reasonable Progress Policy has two main provisions in these bullets here, providing a bi-monthly progress report on projects that have funding in the current federal fiscal year. And then the second bullet, which is the one that we're wanting to adjust, is if projects are not obligated by March 31st of the programmed year, TPB has the option to pull that sub-allocated funding. Of course, the sponsor would have the option to present their case to TPB. But what we're wanting to adjust this to is a little bit of a nicer policy. And this was developed with input from TAC on 2 different dates, and then TPB. We also discussed this with KDOT and member jurisdiction staff as well. And what our recommendation is removing the March 31st date and instead say May 31st, but also make it a little bit softer in that it's not a hard deadline. Instead, it would be a check-in kind of, and it would give the projects then the ability, or the sponsors, the ability to present to TAC and TPB and request additional time if necessary. And what we did add in was if a project is not going to obligate until the last quarter of the year, which is July 1 to September 30th, because we're doing federal fiscal years, then the sponsor would be asked to provide additional information as to how they're going to be sure that it obligates before the end of the year. So the action options today are to approve the Reasonable Progress Policy as presented, not approve it with specific changes, and we recommend approving it as presented. Are there any questions about that?
Ashley, do you mind going back one slide?
Sure.
Please? So, we talked about this before, and I don't know that I recall anyone ever not making obligation. I think if they weren't going to, it was kind of determined earlier on, and maybe a switch was made. So I don't know if it's historically been I think it's a good policy to have in place. I'm kind of curious if you look between, at least the way I look at it, between those second and third bullets. The way I read that second one, and it says the sponsor may present, but that would say that they don't have to. And then the way you read the third bullet, I take it as we're just going to take everyone's word that, yeah, it'll still be obligated by September 30th. Is that right?
Well, we're asking the sponsor to provide whatever information they can to tell us how it's going to obligate and what steps they're taking to make sure it does obligate.
Okay. So does the, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to understand this. Does the May 31st part really even matter then?
There's kind of two sides to this. So we're concerned about projects that are obligating in the last quarter. And then also May 31st is the check-in. So if it's obligating between May 31st and July 1, then we're kind of fine with it. Nick, do you have something?
But to be clear, the last bullet point is for when a project is anticipated to obligate in the last quarter. So even if it's the first quarter and they anticipate obligating in the last quarter, then that last bullet would still apply. Whereas the second bullet that just means if the project has not obligated by that date, then at the next TAC meeting and the TPB meeting after that, they would have an opportunity to present.
Yeah, I get that. And that's fine. I'll let it go. I guess I'm just wondering if it still matters. If you're giving people the opportunity, why would they? I mean, if, unless we're gonna make them show where they're at, we're just gonna tell you, sure, it'll be the last quarter and we're good to go. I'm not trying to split hairs. I was trying to understand the significance and whether there was any relevance to that second bullet. At one time, I mean, in the true sense of what we do, it seems to me that wouldn't be the worst thing that sponsors actually were required to discuss where they're at on May 31st. I mean, I guess what you're doing is giving them an additional month between May 31st and July 1st. If everybody else is good with it, I'll let it go.
Any further questions? Could you please put the recommended actions up there? I'll make a motion that we recommend the TPB approve the reasonable progress policy compartment of federal fiscal year 2023 through 2026 tip amendment number 3 as presented. We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? All in favor, say yes. All opposed, say no. All right, this passes. Thank you. All right, next we have federal fiscal year 2023 through 2026 transportation improvement program amendment 3 projects.
All right. So the projects went through the same public comment period, which was for 15 days. And again, we received no public comments. So there are 6 projects in this amendment that requested changes. There were 3 new projects, 3 projects that needed changes, and then 8 administrative adjustments. And those can all be found on the website at this link. So this map shows the projects. The red ones are amended projects, green are new projects, and blue are the administrative adjustment projects. And those are administrative adjustments are very tiny things that don't actually need approval, but we're letting you know that we have made those adjustments, such as updating contact information or something like that. The new projects are all KDOT projects. There's a bridge or 2 bridges on I-235, and then 2 US 54 projects, one that has sign structures and one that is part of the East Kellogg project. So then this table just shows the formal action that's required for each of the projects. The first project, the City of Garden Plain project, needed to be moved from fiscal year 2023 to 2024, and also had some cost increases for inflation. The bridge project is new here. And then those 2 US 54 projects that are in the table are having some adjustments and moving parts of the project to the new US 54 East Kellogg project that's right below it. And then we have the US 54 sign structures at Ridge Road also. So then this table shows the change in funding. So the Garden Plain one is all local funding changes. The bridges on I-235 has changes in state and federal funding. Then the US 54 projects are moving funds around, and to the other new US 54 project. The sign structures project is new state funding, and then the Seneca and 63rd bike ped pathway has more local funding. And this is just the administrative adjustment, which again does not need approval, but it was just moving some funding around. And we have specific requirements for TIP amendments, and including having a public comment period, making sure it's consistent with the MTP, and then it's also fiscally constrained. Now this TIP amendment adds $80.6 million to the TIP from the mainly from the Kellogg projects. All right, so the amendment options are to approve as presented, not approve, approve with specific changes, and we recommend approving as presented.
Are there any questions? If not, I would make a motion to recommend that TPB approve the project addition modification component of the federal fiscal year 2023 through 26 tip amendment number 3 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say same signal. All right, this passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the 2023 transient assistant management targets. Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alicia Hunter, Senior Planner with WAMPO. So we recently presented to the committee background information on performance-based planning and the requirements for establishing performance targets and for the federal performance measures. And at that TAC meeting, staff presented what we recommended for the performance targets for the performance measures 1, 2, and 3. And today we're here presenting on the transit asset management or TAM targets. So in 2012, the MAP 21 mandated FTA to develop rules establishing a strategic and systematic process of operating, maintaining, and improving public capital assets effectively through their entire life cycle. And so this was solidified through the TAM final rule, which became effective October 1st in 2016. There are 3 federal performance measures that apply to transit agencies operating in the WAMPO region. That includes rolling stock, which applies to revenue vehicles, equipment, which applies to non-revenue service vehicles, and then facilities. So let's briefly go over what WAMPO's target adoption process is for performance measures, and then we'll take a look at what those TAM targets are. MPOs have 2 options for setting PM targets. They can support and adopt the statewide targets established by the state DOT, or they can support the state targets by establishing their own targets. Regardless of which options MPOs choose, they must set their targets no later than 180 days after the state DOTs set and share their targets with the MPOs. And so in coordination with KDOT and Wichita Transit, WAMPO has chosen to support and accept their targets for the WAMPO region. State DOTs and certain transit providers must develop these TAM plans to include the TAM targets. So we're going to be looking at 2 sets of TAM targets that are going to apply to certain areas within the WAMPO region. So let's take a look at those targets. Here on this chart, you can see the KDOT 2023 TAM targets. And these targets apply to the WAMPO region, excluding Wichita Transit's and the City of Derby's service areas. Then here we have Wichita Transit's 2023 TAM targets. And then these targets are going to apply to Wichita Transit and the City of Derby's service areas. That's a brief overview of the TAM targets that WAMPO is proposing to adopt for the WAMPO region. And after the final adoption process, WAMPO is going to reference and support these targets throughout our transportation planning process. And so we recommend to TAC to recommend that TBB approves the 2023 TAM targets. And before we get to a vote, are there any questions?
All right, so no questions. Make a recommendation that we approve the TBB or that we approve the 2023 TAM targets for the WAMPO region as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the discussion updates. We have the K96 improvements. Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Jake Borchers, WSP, and the project manager for the design team here with a brief update on the K96 improvement projects here in Wichita. Maybe if we can get the slides to work. There we go. First and foremost, just want to recognize our project partners. This is a KDOT-led project. KDOT is funding design, eventually construction. City of Wichita is a critical partner, has been from the beginning, very much involved in the design phase. You see at the bottom, several company logos. I won't get into those, but that's our project team. Just know that we're here local in Wichita, invested in the long-term success of the project. Brief update on the project as a whole. looking to improve K-96 in Northeast Wichita. A few updates since the last time we were here. You'll notice on the south and east end, we've extended the project limits. At last time we were here, project ended at 13th Street. We've extended that down to the KTA interchange to close that gap. That's going to connect into the East Kellogg project as it moves forward as well. You'll see also several more red circles than the last time. We're looking to make interchange improvements at several of the interchanges. Like last time we're here, we're focused at Woodlawn, Rock, and Webb. We've added those other interchanges in as well at this point. When you look at the need for the project, it really comes down to the 4 or 5 bullets that you see up on the screen. First and foremost, looking to enhance safety through the corridor, not just for public, traveling public, but bikes, pedestrians, all users. We need to address that aging infrastructure. As you know, the pavement out there has lived its life. KDOT's done a great job getting us a few more years, but it's really time for full replacement. These improvements and the expansion of K-96 are going to support local and regional growth well into the future. And we're looking to address the needs of all users. Again, not just cars or freight, but bicyclists and pedestrians that use the corridor as well. I like to show this. This is just our project vision statement that the project team is using. This keeps us founded and grounded as we look through the project and make those decisions on how to move forward. Coming out of the project, what we're looking to do, the benefits to the community, to the region, obviously, as we increase K-96, increasing that capacity, relieving that congestion, getting traffic to and from their destinations as quickly and efficiently as possible. Those interchange improvements, getting traffic to and from the freeway as quickly as possible. We do those things and inherently we're increasing the safety for all users through the corridor. Quick update on the timeline where we stand here early 2023. We've made it through some of our concept and preliminary design stages and studies. Those have been wrapped up. We have some preliminary concept designs that we're progressing forward. We've completed those studies that were a part of that. We're beginning our environmental review as part of the NEPA process that started earlier this month. It's got a 12-month window, so it's anticipated to be wrapped up early 2024. You see we're working through preliminary design and then final design in the next few years, looking to start construction potentially as early as 2026. I will note this is not funded in the KDOT construction pipeline at this time. As you know, current program does not allow us to allocate funding more than 2 years ahead of time. So that looking to get that funding allocated in the coming months, ideally. You see that big yellow line at the bottom, community engagement. Team's made a really concerted effort to get out, engage the community, get feedback from the public, from the community about K-96, their needs, their concerns throughout the process. We had an open house in February. Lots of good attendance. We had over 100 people show up, talked about our preliminary design concepts, what those interchange improvements might look like. All of that material is up on our website. If you weren't able to come out to that open house, it's there. You can see it, you can review it. I have a chance to leave comments if you have any of those. Some general themes from what we've heard from the public to date, very much supportive of the project as a whole. At that public open house, we came up with a couple different interchange options, diverging diamonds or displaced left turns at a few locations. The public was very supportive and preferred the diverging diamond over the other concepts. Also have heard a lot of support for the continued bike and pedestrian accommodations that are planned to be part of the project. So just a quick overview of the design as it moves forward. You see those red circles at those interchanges. Those are the interchange improvements that we talked about. Several diverging diamonds. First ones in the area. Really As we looked at different options, those rise to the top. And for consistency, we've got those planned at, 4 or 5 of those locations. Greenwich, with the recent improvements that have been made out there, there's not much really that needs to be done. So I think we're adding a couple turn lanes there, but that's going to serve us well into the future. Webb Road, it's kind of its own animal with the geometry, with 29th coming in there with the airport. Diverging Diamond isn't going to function there, but we've got a reconfigured interchange that's going to serve the traffic in that area as well. And then you can see on the bookends, we're tying into North Junction improvements on the west and future East Kellogg improvements on the south and east end. On top of that, you can see the orange section is that 6-lane expansion. And then the yellow is just a continued 4-lane, just pavement replacement to the south. We are including auxiliary lanes between each interchange to make that weave on and off traffic function much better than it is today. Also looking at improving signal coordination, not just at the interchanges, but along the city street networks in the entire area to get traffic to and from as best we can. We talked about those active transportation network enhancements, bicyclist accommodations, pedestrian accommodations, and the like. And then, of course, allowing for future needs. So anything like connected autonomous vehicles, making sure that we're not precluding any of those future improvements. So if you're not familiar with the Diverging Diamond, I've got an example up here. This happens to be at Rock Road. North is to the top. Rock Road kind of running through the middle, K96 left to right on the screen. You can see as you approach the interchange along Rock Road, you would encounter a traffic signal. We would cross over to the left side of the road. Whereas as you continue through there, if you want to continue straight, you come to the next signal, cross back to the right and continue on. The beauty and the benefits of the DDI, Diverging Diamond, as you're on the left side, then you have a free movement onto the freeway. So if you're accessing K96 from Rock Road, you're going through one signal instead of two in a quicker manner, and that left turn is then unopposed to traffic. So it's a safer, more efficient movement. You can see the other benefits off to the side, obviously increased safety, not just traffic, but pedestrians as well. Diverging Diamonds handle a lot of traffic with a smaller footprint. So that helps us reduce costs, get more traffic through with less impact to the surrounding areas. Briefly, next steps, continuing through preliminary design. We have field checks scheduled for this summer, in part with our second open house out to the public. We talked about that NEPA process, anticipated being complete in January. And then obviously all that leads into anticipated construction beginning potentially as early as 2026. I'll end here with our contact info. If you want to reach out to the project team, phone numbers, emails, you can follow us on all the social media channels. I have a project website up here as well. Lots of great information there. Again, if you weren't able to make the open house, if you click on the Get Involved link up at the top, there's a drop down there. Click on that, that could take you to the open house materials. It's all there. You can have a chance to take a look at it and provide any feedback or comments that you may have. With that, I'll end here and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, if you could go back kind of earlier in your slides, were you? Back, yeah. There, whoops. Yes, there one. You made a statement about your projection on how much traffic would be by the year 2050. Is there a comment on that?
Yeah, we are looking at traffic through the corridor, and in some of the segments are looking to double in the next 30 years by 2050.
Okay,
yes.
so are doing all of these improvements going to create that double in usage, or is the usage going to happen anyway and you're preempting it?
The usage is going to happen, and this project is going to accommodate that growth. If the expansion of K96 to 6 lanes is going to accommodate that growth, whereas that traffic is coming. If we don't do something about it, K-96 will be in a worse condition from a congestion standpoint than it is today.
And that increase is based on what?
Traffic projections, land use, future growth throughout the region in the city of Wichita. Any other questions?
Seeing none, thank you. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
All right, next we have issue briefs. We have impact physical activity, distracted driving, and motor vehicle fatalities in Sedgwick County. We have Margaret, the Sedgwick County Health Department.
Hi, I'm Margaret Sharma, and I'm a data analyst at the Sedgwick County Health Department. So today I'm going to share some of the research that we found about the impact of physical activity on health. And this came about from some maps that WAMPO had shared with us that looked at health conditions that could be affected by physical activity. So we just wanted to look and see like what the research says and see if the national research is the same in Sedgwick County, if it matches. So just looking at the research, we can see that physical activity impacts health. It impacts diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer, and mental health. So like diabetes can be prevented up to 46 to 58% by having physical activity. People who are inactive are twice as likely to have heart disease. Physical activity is associated with a 20 to 25% reduction of stroke risk, and physical activity has also been shown to prevent certain types of cancer. So some of those cancers are like colon cancer, breast cancer, kidney cancer, but it's not all cancers, it's just some of them. And it was speaking of, with COVID, mental health has been a big issue, and some researchers have shown that getting the recommended 150 minutes a week was associated with a 25% lower risk of depression, and even getting half of that amount, about 75 minutes a week, was an 18% lower risk of depression. So looking at physical activity, it's really important to health. In addition, physical activity has been linked with children's development, and that children who have more physical activity have a better academic performance and have a higher self-esteem and report higher levels of self-worth. Physical activity has been linked with death, and that even getting 10 minutes of physical activity a day for adults aged 40 to 85 could prevent over 100,000 deaths a day, or a year. So, and even like taking adults who take 7,000 steps or more a day experience lower mortality rates than adults who take fewer than 7,000 steps a day. So just kind of looking at the research, we can see that physical activity is clearly linked to health and preventing chronic health conditions. And the recommended amount for adults is 150 minutes a week, and for children, it's 60 minutes a day. So then we could look at data for Sedgwick County, and we got this from the BRFIS, or the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. And the most recent available data is from 2020. And so with that data, we can look at the adults who report getting no leisure time, no leisure physical activity, as well as the prevalence of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, poor mental health, depression, and cancer. So what we did was we took this data, we put it into a table, we sorted it by adults who get a lot of physical activity to adults who don't get a lot of physical activity, and looked at the health conditions. So all of the red values are high or bad, and the green values are good. So if we look at the top of the table, where there's Census Tract 7 has 42.1% of adults report getting no leisure time, no physical activity leisure time. They have high rates of diabetes, high rates of heart disease, stroke, poor mental health. Their depression is not as bad, but in general, you can see that census tracts with that low physical activity have more poor health conditions, with the exception of cancer. We did not see that correlation with cancer. And that could be because it's only certain types of cancer, and this looks at all cancer excluding skin cancer. So if we look at the bottom the bottom of the table, those who have really high rates of physical activity, they have lower rates of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and mental health and depression. So if looking at the map for Sedgwick County, this map is for adults who report getting no leisure time physical activity. And we can see that most of them are in the metropolitan area. And then looking at those census tracts, a lot of those are census tracts that we have been targeting. And on the maps that WAMPO had provided, they were looking at census tracts 6, 8, 27, 34, 68, and 78, which are all that dark purple. So we can see that in Sedgwick County, we're matching national trends that census tracts that get more physical activity have lower rates of chronic health conditions, with the exception of cancer. The next thing that Sedgwick County Health Department was looking at was distracted driving and pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities and injuries. So first we'll look at the fatality data. And this data comes from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And there are 3 separate data systems that fall within the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And we pulled our data from the Fatality Analysis Reporting System, or the FARS. So all of this data comes from the FARS, which is like from accident reports, state reports, death certificates, vital statistics, things like that. So looking at the United States, on an average, there's over 32,000 fatalities a year. Distracted driving accounts for 8.1% of those fatalities. And then at the health department, we were talking about cell phone usage and whether that was a big part of distracted driving. But what we found is that only 12% of the distracted driving fatalities were cell phone related. So that's about 345 out of 2,880 crashes that involve a cell phone. So distracted driving isn't necessarily a cell phone. It can be people talking in the car, if there's a pet, if you're looking out the window. And so distracted driving is really more of the issue than just cell phones. And the fatal accidents due to cell phones accounts for under 1% of total motor vehicle fatalities in the United States. So between 2010 and 2020, looking at the totals from all 10 years, pedestrians were killed in about 16.7% of fatalities. They accounted for 16.7% of the fatalities, and bicyclists accounted for 2.4% of the driving fatalities for nationally. Looking at Sedgwick County, in the total between 2010 and 2020, there were 85 fatalities due to distracted driving out of 542 total fatalities. And of those 85 on the right, there were 16 pedestrian fatalities that were due to distracted driving and 3 bicyclists that were due to distracted driving. But on the left, you'll see out of all fatalities, not just the distracted driving, but there were 68 pedestrian fatalities and 11 bicyclist fatalities. So comparing that to the national average for pedestrians was 16.7s and ours was 12.5, so we're a little bit lower. And for bicyclists was 2.4%, and we were about 2%. So we look trending a little bit lower. When we break that down into pedestrians versus bicyclists, pedestrians, you can see that Sedgwick County is the green. And 2014, 2016, and 2017, there were some pretty big spikes in pedestrian fatalities in Sedgwick County. And then the graph on the right that shows Kansas and Sedgwick County. So Sedgwick County that green makes up part of the blue, makes up part of Kansas. So you can see that in like certain years, like in 2019, we didn't have any fatalities. 2015, there were no pedestrian fatalities. But then some years, like 2016 was high in Sedgwick County and it was high in Kansas overall. For bicyclists, one thing I wanted to point out is that on the pedestrian graph, the values are higher, but on the bicyclist, a lot of the data values nationwide were hovering around 2%. So the y-axis on this graph only goes up to 50%. It doesn't go up to 100% like the previous graph. But we can see those trends that Sedgwick County, again, had a couple of years with high values, 2014, 2016, 2018. And compared to Kansas, like 2015, we were pretty much all of the bicyclist fatalities occurred in Sedgwick County. The majority did, versus like in 2012. So then that was data that came from the FARS. We then collected data from Essence, which is the electronic surveillance system for early notification of community-based epidemics. And this collects data from ERs. So it doesn't include immediate care. It doesn't include urgent care. It doesn't include if you were in an accident and then you went to your doctor later because your ankle was bothering you or something like that. It's only ER visits. And because it's the ER visits is by ICD-10 codes, so we couldn't look at distracted driving in this instance. So this is just to look at an overview of accidents and injuries from that occur to pedestrians and occur to bicyclists. So just looking at the numbers, we can see that cyclists per year, this is from 2018 to 2022, there's over 1,000 cyclist injuries a year, and there's about 300 to 400 pedestrian injuries from a motor vehicle per year in Sedgwick County. And when we pull those apart, pedestrians, I was kind of surprised. I thought that maybe there would have been higher values in 2020, 2021, 2022 because more people were outside and walking, but we actually saw a little bit of a decrease, and that could be because there are fewer cars out. Not sure about that. And then the graph on the right shows the visit reason, the ICD-10 codes. So one thing with this data set is that someone who gets the V9, the pedestrian injured and other and unspecified transport accidents, sometimes that could have been an accident like in the parking lot, or it could be someone getting their hand stuck in the door. It's not always easy to pull out what is a true pedestrian injury versus something that involved a car. But we can see that the majority of pedestrian injuries are from a collision with a car, truck, pickup truck, or van. And then the second most common reason is that V9, where it's pedestrian injured in another unspecified transport accident. And then looking at cycling injuries, we again see that trend where it kind of went down in 2020 through 2022. And the biggest reasons for ER visits for bicyclists is that V18 pedal cycle rider injured in a non-collision transport accident. And a lot of those for the bicyclists were someone on a bicycle swerves to prevent being hit, and then they lose control and fall. So it's not necessarily that a car hits them, but it's a lot of times it was that they were swerving to avoid being hit. But it also pulls in data like if someone slipped on wet pavement and it didn't involve a car, it would still get pulled under that non-collision transport accident. So if we compare the two by rate, if we taking those injuries per 100,000 Sedgwick County residents, we can see that there are a higher rate of bicycle injuries than pedestrian injuries. But when we look back at the fatality data, there were higher rates of pedestrian fatalities compared to bicyclist fatalities. So if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. Bicycles are higher rate of speed. It's a little bit riskier. You're on the road with cars, so you're more likely to get injured, but have lower fatalities. Whereas if a pedestrian gets injured, it tends to be more fatal. So that was those are some of the things that the Sedgwick County Health Department was looking at for transportation. Are there any questions?
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
It's always good to see numbers behind everything. I like all those stats.
Yes, thank you for inviting us.
All right, next we have the housing costs and labor mobility. We have several people, Jonathan, Craig, and Jeremy from CEDBR.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Craig Compton. I'm the newest economist for the CED BR under Jeremy. So nice to meet all of you. I'm going to give a quick high-level overview of some findings on the Wampo region housing. So first, we'll start off with just some basic demographics. Most of the people in the Wichita area are of the working age, above the age of 18, underneath the age of 65, and plenty of those folks comes with families. We also do have a rising a rising population of seniors. So they'll have demand for senior housing, and as that demand for senior housing increases, so will access, which kind of informs a need for transportation planning there. We also have some general income changes throughout the region. And so this bracket is a breakdown of per capita income pre-tax. And you can see the map on the right shows just general swaths of the census tract. You can see that in pink, it's a lower per capita income. In deep blue, it's a higher per capita income. And so you can see toward the city core, we've got more of that pink, and as you get out toward the suburbs, you get a higher income in general. This leads into the conversation of rent prices across the board. Rent prices are increasing in most communities. The average rent increase from 2017 to 2021 was about $111. And so on the right, you'll see the graph, which is the rent percent change against the Kansas average. And so that Kansas average increase was 14%, but the graph on the right can give you information to see where the population might be induced to locations where they might rent in the future, depending upon whether rents are increasing or decreasing relative to that Kansas average. Which leads into the conversation of burden rent. Anyone spending over 30% of their income or more on their rent is considered burdened. And so you can see for a majority of these communities in the Wampo region, in that far right column of 35% or more, some of their highest percentages lie within that column. And so we do have a pretty I don't want to call it pretty burdened, but we do have some burdened folks in our community. And so that goes into the conversation of transportation planning, because reducing burden rent can just be aided by the effort of transportation planning. But looking for people who own houses, we can look at household values. This can be kind of an indicator of planning needs. On the right side, we can look at the household value growth relative to the Kansas average. And this is one of those other graphs that shows the induction of people and where they might be likely to buy houses in the future, or where the population might move to. Overall, the Kansas growth was 18%, and the median home value in 2021 was $164,000. So this further informs a conversation of housing affordability in the Wampo region. We can look at this map. This map shows same scale. So the lower housing affordability is in that pink, higher housing affordability is in that deep blue. You'll notice the two largest sectors of the housing affordability, I should say the two largest swaths with that pink are actually Dwight D. Eisenhower and McConnell Air Force Base. So, that'll show up if there is limited data, which might skew that map. So otherwise, you can see the swaths of pink near that downtown core, some up north. And so you can take those into consideration as you continue to plan. The index of 100 is considered to be affordable. So really anything in pink is captured by that. Anything in orange, yellow, or blue is considered to be above that threshold. So this is a graph of the owners and renters and the comparison of the two. You can see that there is lots of renters in Mays and Wichita. Most of the other communities in the Wampa region see a large majority of homeowners, which can affect transportation planning and the need to access transportation. Furthermore, this leads into the conversation of kind of this alignment of supply and demand. An interesting stat that I have to throw out there is that Mays actually doubled their housing units from 2017 to 2021, and they maintained consistent occupancy, meaning that for every unit that they made, they filled. So that can kind of inform you on the demand of communities like that in the Wampa region that might need access to that housing. So this ties back into the conversation of why these statistics are important for housing and transportation planning. And as economists, we always bring everything back to the household and the firm. And so for the household, if you invest in improvements in that transportation access and look at kind of the more affordable housing and trying to bring people closer to affordable housing, that enables people to live closer to better jobs, which lower their transportation costs and increase their mobility overall. And then to businesses, to local firms, improvements in that transportation infrastructure and just overall public transportation will not only increase their access to the body of labor, but it will increase the access to labor compatibility so that people are more aligned with the jobs that they're suited for. So if anyone has any questions, field those now. Yes, ma'am.
I see that number often about if you're rent burdened, if it's over 30% of your income. Is that your gross income or is that your income after taxes or what?
I believe it's gross income. Jeremy, is that correct? Okay, yes, gross income. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
Quick comment. Thank you, Craig. Just want to provide a context for the technical committee members why this presentation is happening today. As Craig mentioned, the relationship between the housing and transportation planning is something that we are exploring. Staff at Wampa, as we are working on long-range transportation plan development that's due in May 2025, many MPOs try to illustrate that relationship between transportation and economy. The economy has many components like housing and jobs, various aspects of business communities and within various cities and jurisdictions. So, forgive me, this effort is it's difficult to illustrate that relationship between what are the impacts of economy on transportation and what are the impacts of transportation improvements on economy. It's usually very difficult to measure those. Many MPOs try those. So this is our effort as staff at Wampa. How do we incorporate these impacts of economy on transportation? And then how do we identify transportation improvements and its impacts on economy? So we are very pleased with the way Craig, Jonathan, and Jeremy are providing the data. They have one of the best data at WSU, Wichita State University. We as staff were not able to measure and illustrate the way the relationship that were described by Craig and his team. So they're also looking forward to share with you in the next few months or so the forecasts on population and employment and jobs as well. So just want to provide the context on, why this presentation and, some of the more presentations in the future as well. And we have really a great resource at WSU, Craig, Jeremy, and Jonathan. So with that, thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Yeah, and this was again very high level. So if we have any more specific insights that we want to investigate as we move forward, we can certainly take a look at that. But otherwise, I thank you all, and I'll go ahead and turn this over to my colleague Jonathan.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I noticed that next in the order is the household index, government vitality and business dynamism indexes. That I think would be best served after talking about the labor mobility report. I don't know if these got put into the slide deck in the wrong order. Could we move to the labor mobility report section? Because that comes next in the order of discussion.
You'll need to share your screen, Jonathan.
Okay, not a problem. Let's see. Great. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. As Craig and Chad both said, WAMPO and JEO and CEDBR are all producing this larger economic development report. As a component of that, we are looking at the relation of certain economic indicators to the transportation system. So now what Craig just talked about with the housing stock affects primarily people who are moving to and within the communities in the WAMPO region, right? This does not, this is not the only way that you can look at the influences of an effective transportation system. So labor mobility is also an important conversation here. How are people commuting to and within these communities, and where is your labor force originating, and what pathways are they using and when, right? So same kind of illustration here of how mobility within the labor force relates to transportation. It is primarily characterized by improvements in efficiency, and this improvements in efficiency can happen to people or to firms, right? So to people, the improvements primarily are happening to the range and speed with which they're able to get to their jobs or to services. It can improve the overall level of employment and reduce the cost of transportation. Like, let's say, instead of reducing, let's say it's more efficient to take cheaper public transportation means than a personal vehicle in some instances that might have higher gas costs, for example. To people, those benefits that they're seeing from that are an increase in the effective wage. So if they reduce their cost of transportation to and from their jobs, they have more disposable income and are better able to engage in local markets and with local services. To firms, you're seeing some of those same improvements in regional competitiveness, allowing different communities across the Wichita Metro to specialize in terms of the kinds of services and commerce that they provide. Because of the increased range and speed of access to employment among your labor force, you're expanding the labor pool for those firms, so better able to match labor skills to the jobs that are available. And you're going to see supply chain improvements as well, because the supply chain is utilizing some of those same networks, particularly your roads and bridges. This is reducing the burden of tight labor markets, which we've seen as a major, a major concern over the last few years of how difficult it is to find the best labor for unfilled jobs. And that lowers the operational costs, especially in terms of improving the supply chain management. So the report on labor mobility looks at demographic concerns in the same way that the housing supply one does. So as an example of how we would look at demographics, right? Age cohorts. You have youths, you have working age persons, and you have seniors. Each of the, outside of that working age cohort, you have youths who have a different taste and preferences in and different concerns of what kinds of transportation systems are they using. Here you can see a few of what those cohorts identify as their primary concerns. How we would illustrate that in the report is the changing share of the population that exists within each of these communities of those cohorts, and we compare that to the state and national averages. So labor force residence is our first indicator of actual mobility. So where is your labor force living with relative to their work? You have the share of persons who lives in state, which is most across all of these communities in the region. But then you have in county and in the city or town. So you can see here on the chart on the right that Wichita has about 20% of its labor force living in Wichita itself, but that is by far lower than many of these other communities, living in a different town. So for one of these other communities, you're seeing a significant share of the labor force living in a community that is not the same as where they're working. What this means is that you have a very interconnected labor market across the entire metro, with Wichita serving as the hub. This is going to significantly impact the way that the transportation system is used. People are utilizing wider networks of transportation to get to where they're working, and that means you need robust interconnected access across these different communities. So means of transportation is another one that we look at in this report. So the share of people who are driving alone versus carpooling, who is using your walking trails and bicycle paths, the share of people who are using public transport and what kind of public transport, and then the share of people who are working at home. And we look at these over time as well. We're looking also at the time of day of commutes, because the robustness of your transportation system is going to also depend on its ability to provide for things like the morning rush, right? Where you have a lot of these peripheral communities around the Wampo region, the ones toward the edges, having earlier commute times from, in some cases, even from midnight to 5 a.m. So an important consideration in determining traffic flow is when the traffic will be there, right? And when those public transport means are accessible. The duration is also another one that we look at in this report. It's generally perceived that a lot of communities in Kansas have longer commute times, but overall, we actually see a little bit different of a story in the Wampo region, where persons core to the city in Wichita and Eastboro have much shorter commute times on average than the state average and US average. And across most of the region, we're still seeing lower commute times than national averages, even if it is a little bit higher than the state average. And again, we're looking at these over time. So we move through this very quickly. That's the end of those slides. Does anybody have any clarifying questions?
Seeing none, I appreciate it.
Great. I will turn it back over to the other share.
Jonathan, we don't have the household government vitality ones in our slide deck either.
Okay, then I will, that's next in the agenda.
Yes.
Then I will take it right back over and we will get moving on those. Stand by. Okay, can everybody see this one?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. So CEDBR, which for people who don't know this acronym, this is Wichita State University Center for Economic Development and Business Research. We're economists. And so we're producing these high-level indicators and indexes that look at the perspective of the economy across the Wampo region from different perspectives. So we have these three indexes: the household index, business dynamism, and government vitality. And relative in each of these, they're looking at the state of the economy from the household perspective, the perspective of firms, and the perspective of government. We're going to move into our household index first. And there are three dimensions across this of healthy, wealthy, and wise. You'll hear us refer to this as our healthy, wealthy, wise index. How this works is that for each of these indexes, there are three variables that we're considering to tell the broad perspective of the economy in a community that we then use to rank these communities against each other. Where are the strengths and where are the weaknesses of those communities, and what are the risk factors? So the healthy dimension is assessing the risk that exists within the labor market. The wealthy dimension represents the amount of economic opportunity and upward mobility potential that exists there. And the wise dimension measures the level of education across different levels of educational attainment, with the assumption that a more skilled workforce, or one with a higher level of educational attainment, is more productive. So within your healthy dimension, you have low birth weight, obesity, and the rate of uninsured persons. In the wealthy dimension, you have the Gini coefficient, which is the disparity in terms of income in the community. And you have household income and the poverty rates, which are self-explanatory. And same thing in the WISE index, you have the share of persons who have associates and technical degrees, bachelor's degrees, and advanced degrees. So we produced a report for each of these indexes that looks at the rankings and the level values. And I won't go through this just for brevity. But we have the levelized data, and one of the critical components of making this data accessible, it was creating a data dashboard that will be hosted online. This is an example of what it's going to look like using data for Rose Hill. Rose Hill being, if you can see my mouse, I'm not sure that you can, but it's over toward the right side of that left-hand map, just below Andover. So you'll see the number rankings that are in the map. Those correspond to, in the table in the center right, the overall rank. And then below that is provided the actual level values for each of those communities, as well as the dimension specific rankings or variable specific rankings for each dimension in the charts below. So online, you'll be able to select the communities that you want to look at from a drop-down menu, and these charts will update automatically. So this will be a very accessible way of people looking at the rankings and this data. It's much the same for business dynamism, which has the two dimensions of business diversification, because you have large communities able to generally specialize in more or have a more broad base of occupations across different sectors. And you have smaller communities that are able to really drill down into specific industries to really capitalize on the economies of agglomeration. We look at employment, establishment, and wage diversity or diversification, and then the growth over the 5-year period of employment and wages. Same sort of thing. We produce the tables that look at the values, and for diversification, it's measured in Hackman indexes, and the 5-year growth in percentages. And then same thing with the ranks. The dashboards that we provide for those are much the same, but it's just explaining how the components of the business dynamism index relate to each other. And it will be much the same for government vitality, right? So the perspective from government, the market growth, the government is a product of the market that it serves. So you have annual incomes, and then another one of CEDBR's produced indexes, which is called our current index, that this takes a look at things like the primary businesses and sectors that drive those local economies. For example, in Wichita, in the larger Wichita metropolitan area, aerospace manufacturing is a very important employer and drives the local economy very strongly. We look at durable goods production and we weight that by the share of employment in aerospace production as a measure for assessing the impact and trends of those the trends of those markets over time. So you have a market that is growing in those. So you're able to compare communities on that basis. Your core economic drivers, these are driving driving a lot of the revenues to government. So you have home values being one of the primary sources of revenue to local governments. You have the share of the prime age workforce being an indicator for the productivity of your labor market, typically as the share of prime age workers, which is 23 to 54, goes up. You have a workforce that is more inclined to be in the most like highest output and lowest like cost period of their lives. And you have inward mobility, which is the share of people who moved into communities did so from somewhere else. So how attractive are these communities from abroad? Then you have fiscal growth. Governments provide services, and in an expanding economy, as we are, you have a need to expand the fiscal side of things to provide a set level of services. And so you have the variables there of bonds, which this includes all bonds. property tax collections and retail sales as drivers on the fiscal side to governments. And again, it's much the same where you have tables that look at the ranks and the level values of each of these variables across the communities, and a dashboard where you can look at those visually and look at the rankings and levels online. So that is those slides. Any questions here?
Seeing none, I appreciate the appreciate your explanation of everything.
Thank you. I will now turn it over.
For these reports, it's on the website and also linked on your packet. The detailed is on the report, the packet, as well as the rest of the website. That's all. Just thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no questions. Next, we have the 2021 AADT report. Alicia.
Sorry for the technical difficulty. So I'm going to be presenting on the 2021 AADT report. AADT stands for Annual Average Daily Traffic, and it's one of the most widely used and available data sources for transportation planning and traffic engineering. And it's a basic measurement that indicates how busy a road is along a roadway on an average day in any given year. Using KDOT's traffic count data, which was developed by the Traffic and Field Operations Unit in the Bureau of Transportation Planning, WAMPO staff developed a 2021 AADT report for 7 major corridors in the WAMPO region. And those corridors are I-35, I-135, I-235, US 54, K-15, K-96, and K-254. The AADT report briefly covers and illustrates KDOT's data collection and collection site types. The 7 major corridors are divided into segments that are delineated by intersecting roadways, and each corridor has its own subsection where traffic volumes are illustrated in a map, a chart or set of charts, and a table. The AADT maps, they illustrate the magnitude of traffic volume on each segment along a specified corridor by using graduated symbols. And then the charts show a difference between the 2020 and 2021 AADT count numbers. And then the tables will list these segments for the corridors and their associated AADT numbers in 2020 and 2021. And then all the traffic volumes that are shown are bidirectional, so they are two-way numbers. And in addition to reporting on the corridors individually, the report also has a corridor comparison. This corridor comparison map here illustrates the major corridors and which ones are heavily traveled relative to one another. And it was created by defining and applying these same traffic volume ranges for each corridor. And once you do that, you reveal that US 54 is the most traveled corridor in the WAMPO region. So also included in the report is a section illustrating the highest AADT segments along the corridors. This table and the subsequent maps are going to show the segment with the highest traffic volume rounded to the nearest 1,000 for each corridor. And for all 7 corridors, the segment with the highest traffic volume is on US 54 from Washington Street to I-35 with an AAD count of 121,000. And then for the highest travel segment on I-135, that is 93,000 AADT, and that's between Central and Murdoch Avenue. And then for I-235, the highest traffic volume segment is 69,000, and that's located between Broadway Street and North Junction. And then for K96, the highest traveled segment is between Hillside and Oliver with an AAD count of 31,000. Oh, sorry, excuse me, sorry, 63,000. I was like, I was reading that, didn't sound right. My apologies. Okay, so for K15, the highest corridor is 31,000, and that one is between I-135 and the I-35 junctions. And then we have I-35, and its highest volume segment is from 55th Street and 71st Street with a count of 28,000. And then the last corridor and the least traveled compared to all the other corridors is K254 with its highest traffic volume segment between North Junction and Hillside Street with a count of 18,000. So that's a quick look at the just highest travel segments. And if you'd like more details about the ADT and specifics on all those segments, please check out the report. Are there any questions?
Seeing none, appreciate the report.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Sedgwick County versus Johnson County crashes. Nessa.
Hello. Thank you everyone for having me here today. I believe WAMPO has the slides. Okay, great. So I'm Vanessa Spartan. I am the Bureau Chief of Transportation Safety at Kansas Department of Transportation. I have on the call with me today Maggie Wilcox. She is a planner within our Bureau who did this analysis. So I'm going to do the presentation just to keep brief, but I have Maggie in case there's any questions that I don't have the specific background information on. If you can do the next slide, please. Do I advance the slides? Okay, there we go. So why did we do this analysis? So first off, at a WAMPO Health and Safety Committee meeting, a question came up as to, prior slide, here we go. A question came up as to why Sedgwick County has more severe crashes than Johnson County. And just to help everybody understand that context, Johnson County has slightly larger population, it has 78,000 more people, but Sedgwick County has about 2 to 3 times more fatal crashes than Johnson County. And so that does statistically stand out for us. And it has been something that's been on our radar for a long time. We're very excited that WAMPO is doing a comprehensive safety action plan to really dive into the numbers a little bit more. But we were specifically asked by Chad Peraza, kind of, what do we see in the data that's causing those differences? So what we ended up doing was a look at just fatal and serious injury crashes. So the 2 highest severity levels and looking at 5 years of data. So 2017 to 2021, and then comparing that data amongst the 2 counties. Before I switch to the next slide, what I want to just point out on the map is, while you don't have a legend to look at on this, the red color is indicating fatal, the goldish color is serious injury. And so if you look at Sedgwick versus Johnson County, you're going to see more red than yellow. And then you're also going to see that the dots are more dispersed. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later as we get into the data. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of what we ended up doing in terms of the analysis, so USDOT is leading a new paradigm shift in transportation safety called a safe system approach. And we specifically looked at safer roads and safer people. I think if you hit the arrow, there we go. So we looked at 2 elements of the safer system. We did not look into the vehicle types. We did not look into the speed of travel, and we did not look into post-crash care. If you can go to the next slide. In terms of the difference that we're seeing in fatal and serious crashes in the two counties. So every time you see different charts in this presentation, know that the orange is Sedgwick County and the blue is Johnson County. And you can see that Sedgwick County is higher in just about every area. What we're seeing is 171 more fatal crashes over the 5 years and 220 more serious injuries over the 5 years. And some people ask, what is a serious injury? In our crash report, it's well defined for the law enforcement community, but more specifically in 2019, that definition changed. And so statewide, we did see a spike in 2019 occur, but most places kind of evened out or slightly increased after 2019. But as you can see with Sedgwick County, you continued to increase in those serious injury numbers. If you can go to the next slide. So we broke down looking at fatal crashes of Sedgwick County versus Johnson County. So 291 versus 120 fatal crashes. In terms of the persons, so the fatalities, there was 315 in Sedgwick County, 129 in Johnson County. If you look at different factors of exposure, so fatal crashes per 100,000 people, get 11.34 in Sedgwick County, 4.03 in Johnson County. If you look at it from a traffic exposure standpoint, so the volume of traffic, you have 4.81 in Sedgwick County to 1.63 in Johnson County. And then if you look at those serious injury crashes, 930 versus 710, and then the exposure of by volume is 15.36 versus 9.63. And then if the heartstrings of saving lives doesn't draw your attention, the other way to look at this is from an economic impact. So if we took comprehensive crash costs, just so you know, Kansas is standing at about $12 million per fatal crash in terms of comprehensive crash costs, and about 700,000 for serious injury. And so if you look at those comprehensive crash costs for the 5 years for Sedgwick County, it's a $4.4 billion number. So that stands out in terms of the overall impact of these crashes. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so walking you through this slide. So we tried to look at the context of which these fatal crashes were occurring. So we looked at, is a crash occurring within an urban area boundary or not? So if it's not within an urban area boundary, it'd be considered rural. And then was it occurring on a local road? So a road that is owned or maintained by a city or county. Or is it on a road owned or maintained by KDOT? And what you end up seeing is it's higher in Sedgwick County in every area, but really standing out is in an urban area, you're about 2 times higher than Johnson County. In a rural area, you're 4 times higher than Johnson County. And then in terms of locally owned roads, you're about 3 times higher than Johnson County. But then when it comes to state network crashes, it's about even, it's about 1.3 to 1 in that ratio. If you go to the next slide. Okay, and then with this, we looked at the network size to understand exposure. So if we look at the 2 left bars on the bar chart, we're looking at centerline lane mileage, and the plus numbers are indicating how much more lane mileage you have in Sedgwick County versus what Johnson County has. So you have more mileage, more centerline lane mileage, but then the middle bar charts are showing that you have less ADT, less traffic. And then more specifically looking at kind of roadway ownership versus functional classification. When we looked at that functional classification, we saw kind of interesting thing where you have, while you have more centerline lane mileage in most of your network, you have less locally functionally classified urban mileage. So that kind of stands out a little bit in terms of exposure, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. The other area that we're looking at in terms of safety and nationally is being looked at is areas of disadvantage, right? So is there a climate or disaster risk burden? Is there environmental burden, a health vulnerability, a social vulnerability, or a transportation insecurity? Any one of those factors makes up a disadvantaged community. And in Sedgwick County, 35% of Sedgwick County is categorized as a disadvantaged community by the U.S. Department of Transportation. whereas 2.76% of Johnson County is. And then we went ahead and looked at the FARS data in terms of the fatal crashes and the vehicle occupant victims of those fatal crashes. In 2019, we had, that's our most recent of FARS data that we can use, but we had 38 fatalities where the vehicle occupants were of Hispanic ethnicity statewide. 12 of those 38 or 32% were in Sedgwick County. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, and then we looked at contributing factors in fatal and serious injury crashes, or I'll just say factors, not everything's always contributing, but the big takeaway from this chart is a couple things. If you hit the next arrow also, thank you. So lane departure is the largest of the vehicle maneuvers for your region. But when you look at the comparison, which is what we were challenged, right? The comparison between Sedgwick and Johnson County, you actually see the biggest difference in run off the road crashes. And then when it comes to risky driving behaviors, you see unbelted occupants is both your highest area, but also the highest difference between the two counties. But also worthy of mentioning is speeding has, more than a 2% difference. And then also in the pedestrian cyclist involved crashes, the reason why we're pointing that one out is that statewide, we're at about 9%, and in Sedgwick County, you're at 15% over this 5-year period. So that does stand out to us as well. You can go to the next slide. So just giving you some real high level conclusions, what I would want to caution first is that you're doing a comprehensive safety action plan that's going to do much more analysis for your region. This was truly just a comparative analysis for 5 years of data between the two counties. But one of the big takeaways that we have is that, it's your comprehensive crash cost for that 5-year period of time for just fatal and serious injury crashes was $4.4 billion. Overall, what we encourage is doing a 4E approach to safety. So focusing on safe road user education messaging, focusing on enforcement of traffic laws, whether that is the writing of traffic laws by local or state agencies to the traffic citations and adjudication of those laws, engineering proven countermeasures that can help to reduce risk and vulnerabilities, and then emergency response is the critical one. So looking more specifically at how timely post-crash care factors into the ability for crash victims to survive a crash. The comparative analysis does provide some initial clues, but we would encourage, further exploration through various regional traffic safety partners. So if you go to the next slide, we'll give you some of those clues that we see. So we see crashes and your traffic patterns are more widely dispersed between when you compare Sedgwick and Johnson County. So lower volumes, but more lane mileage. In those situations, education countermeasures can be beneficial. But also when you're looking at engineering improvements, you might look at a systemic approach rather than kind of chasing the dots of just going where the one fatal crash occurs. Is there something that is a characteristic of that location that actually is occurring in a larger network pattern? Then I would also say exploring why you have more local urban crashes despite less local urban mileage. It could indicate some spot locations to look at, or it could be something to focus at from a systemic approach. Explore conditions and factors that are contributing to runoff road crashes, both in urban and rural contexts. We saw it in both areas of the data. For education enforcement countermeasures, really focusing on social norming to reduce risky driving behavior. So, focus on positive messaging around why seatbelts are, save lives and why more people should be wearing seatbelts, but also focusing on speed as we know that speed is a major factor in kinetic energy and crash severity. And then the last thing, explore some engineering investments and education campaigns to improve safety for your disadvantaged communities and for your vulnerable road users like your pedestrians and cyclists. So that is the takeaway of the analysis. So the next slide just has our information, myself and Maggie Wilcox, and I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions, anyone from members? WAMPO staff would like to thank you. Vanessa Spartan is the Bureau Chief of Safety at KDOT. And we know your schedule is busy and there's a conference that's upcoming.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chad, for mentioning that. I would encourage everyone to attend the Transportation Safety Conference at the Hyatt Regency in Wichita this year in April.
Vanessa, could you please confirm the dates one more time on the conference?
Yeah, and I think I can put it in the chat too, if that makes it easier for everyone, but it is the 24th through the 26th. The 24th is for law enforcement, but the 25th and 26th is open to everyone. And the agenda does include a 4E approach to safety. So we tackle all areas and we have a really good agenda. We have keynote speakers from National Transportation Safety Board, Secretary of Transportation, FHWA, NHTSA, all kinds of different folks. So
thank you so much again, Vanessa. I think, the safety, Vanessa's team and her staff made great contributions towards developing a grassroots level safety coalition in Sedgwick County, and they have a website on Be Safe Sedgwick County. WAMPO is also working on a CSAP. It's also called as Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. Ashley, myself, and Nick and Alicia, we all are working on that. Tomorrow, there's a meeting in the afternoon. So we are exploring the opportunities where the Vanessa's team's efforts and WAMPO staff efforts can merge, and areas where we can help each other in developing these efforts of reaching out to communities. I mean, the real challenge is how do we encourage community engagement in this reducing fatalities? That was the thing we all are brainstorming and exploring various ways of doing this. And we applaud Vanessa's and Chris and our team's contributions towards breakthrough for some of those challenges of reaching out to communities. To be continued, there's a lot of effort and a lot going on, both WAMPO staff and KDOT, various activities. But thanks again, Vanessa.
thank you, Chad.
Yeah, thank you, Chad and Vanessa. All right, next we have committee and partnership updates. Ashley.
Thank you. So I was just going to talk about the United Community Transit Coalition because that is a new coalition that we just recently formed. We had our first meeting in February and our next one will be May 18th. And this was all about trying to coordinate transit in Sedgwick County, Butler County, and Harvey County. And we're actually doing a logo contest right now. So if anyone wants to participate, please submit. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have other business. I don't think we have any. All right, just want to appreciate everybody, say thank you for all the presentations. There are a lot of presentations and a lot of good information in there. So, all right, next we have adjournment. Make a motion, we adjourn today's meeting. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? You can say. All right, thank you very much.